The story of positive psychology. The field of positive psychology is young. Around the time the first electric light bulbs were switching on all over the world, psychologists were trying to unravel the mystery of how our brains work. In the first half of the 1900s, Watson and Skinner created a theory to explain this mystery. Behaviorism assumes we're all born as blank slates. All of our behaviors are the direct result of our experience in the world. In other words, all of our behaviors are reactions to stimuli in the environment. We don't decide or think about our actions, we simply react. In the 1960s, when my dad was a hippie at UC Berkeley, psychologists began to question behaviorism. They came to believe that we don't just react to the environment, rather, there's some thinking that goes on between the stimuli we encounter and our responses. When trying to understand the results of some experiments with dogs, Martin Seligman discovered a phenomena called learned helplessness. To explore this phenomena, Martin and Steve Meyer conducted an experiment where they put dogs in a box and gave them a mild shock. Most of the dogs figured out they could push a panel to stop the shock. Another group of dogs was yoked to the first group. They experienced the shock until the dog in the first box pushed the panel. In other words, these dogs had no control over when the shock stopped. The third group, a control group, got no shocks at all. Once the dogs had experienced these conditions many times, all of the dogs were taken to a shuttle box, where they could escape the shock by simply jumping over a lower barrier. When placed in the shuttle box, something fascinating happened. The dogs that had learned to push the panel to stop the shock quickly learned to jump over the barrier and escape the shock. The dogs in the control group did the same thing. The yoked group, however, was completely different. They just laid there and endured the shock. They did nothing. The researchers concluded that dogs could learn to be helpless, a finding directly in conflict with the tenets of behaviorism. When they published their findings, some of the greatest minds in psychology attacked them in their research. Learned optimism. In the face of these attacks, Seligman and Meyer persisted. They asked the question, if dogs and people could learn to be helpless, could they also learn control or optimism? Seligman's groundbreaking book, Learned Optimism, reported his research and its amazing implications. Seligman said, explanatory style is the manner in which you habitually explain to yourself why events happen. It is the great moderator of learned helplessness. A positive explanatory style, or optimism, is related to a wide variety of beneficial outcomes. For example, broad research has shown that people with positive explanatory styles cope with stress more effectively. They tend to have stronger social support, better mental and emotional well-being. They experience shorter and shallower bouts of discouragement and depression. They're at lower risk for illness and early death. They even tend to have a higher number of positive life events. Explanatory style. An individual's explanatory style has three dimensions: pervasive, permanent, and personal. Let's say you fail a math test. You naturally think about why you failed. How do you explain it to yourself? If you explain it by thinking that you're dumb at math, the explanation is global or pervasive, permanent, and internal. It is global because it doesn't matter where you go. In another room or at another university, it does not matter. You will always be a math dummy. It is permanent because you will still be a math dummy tomorrow, next week, and next year. It's internal because it's part of who you are. You're stuck. You're helpless when it comes to math. On the other hand, if you think, wow, I bombed that test. Dang, how'd that happen? Well, I was busy and feeling sick, so I didn't study much, and I couldn't concentrate very well. This explanation is not global. It's specific. You will not be a math dummy if you take the test in another room or go to another university. It is not permanent, rather it is temporary. Next time, hopefully you'll not be sick and you can study more and concentrate better. Finally, it is not internal to you. You are not a math dummy. It is not a problem with your brain, but factors outside you led you to bomb the test. What about depression? Can you think your way out of that? Well, it depends. Different types of depression require different interventions. Interestingly, though, using a cognitive approach to learn a positive explanatory style brings relief to sufferers of many forms of depression. Let's review the process. A person begins by identifying the ABCs. the activating event, the belief about why the event happened, and the consequence of that belief. A negative explanatory style often creates a negative belief that will lead to unwanted consequences. A, I failed the test. B, I'm never going to learn college algebra. C, since algebra is a required class, I'm doomed. I will never graduate from college. Might as well drop out now and go skiing. A key therapeutic step is disputation, looking for evidence supporting the negative belief, which is usually lacking. Wait a minute, I learned geometry in high school and got a good grade, even though it was a hard class. Last, a person can provide alternative explanations. A positive explanation might be, maybe I am not a math dummy. Maybe I just didn't use the right study strategies this time. A positive explanation is simply a lot more useful than a negative one because it brings with it the potential for better feelings, increased effort, and improved outcomes. Pro tip, if you can't come up with a positive explanation immediately, try the technique of distancing, making the decision to put the failure out of your mind for a while before revisiting and analyzing it. Positive psychology. Although Seligman and others found this cognitive approach effective, he learned something that surprised him. Although he could moderate people's depression, he couldn't necessarily make them happy. Rather, some people describe themselves as empty. So what is the point of moderating depression if people don't find happiness? This question changed the face of psychology. Seligman realized that the traditional model of studying people with mental illness was limiting results. He decided the best way forward was to study happy people and factors leading to flourishing, building a good life, full of well-being, meaning, and satisfaction. Positive psychology was born. The publication of Seligman's book, Authentic Happiness, was at the forefront of this powerful movement. A variety of lines of research began exploring factors leading to a good life and happiness, like the how of happiness, flourish, the myths of happiness, happy money, and the power of meaning. In this class, we'll use the book Flourish and rely on the PERMA model introduced by Seligman as a foundation to think about intentional thriving.